Hi, Getty from GettyStewart.com here, talking about breadcrumbs and showing you my favorite way to make breadcrumbs. Now there are a few different ways, and so here today we are going to take our bread, put it on our sheet pan, dry it out in the oven, and then use either the food processor or your rolling pin to make these gorgeous breadcrumbs that have fantastic flavor. So first things first, what kind of bread are you going to use? Well, I use whatever I have on hand. So if it's homemade bread, this happens to be sourdough, here's a whole wheat loaf, and I also use various store-bought breads that we have as well. And sometimes it's the leftover bits, like the heel ends that tend to dry out a little bit and nobody eats. It may be a leftover half a bagel. It may be hot dog buns or hamburger buns or just about any kind of bread that you have. Now for us, we keep a bag like this in the freezer so that we can save them up for a day like today when we empty the bag and we use them to make breadcrumbs. So all of these kinds of breads I'm going to mix together and make one batch of breadcrumbs like this. Now, if you have a very specific purpose for your breadcrumbs, we do know that different kinds of breads, like a white bread, will soak up more moisture than a hearty bagel or whole wheat bread or artisan bread. So if you want something that's super absorbent, you're making a lot of meatballs, then you might only want to take the inside of the white bread and even leave out the rind or the crust. But to me, that's just a waste, and for most home cooking applications, having a mixed breadcrumb like this is going to work absolutely fine. And just think, nothing goes to waste this way. So let's get right to it. One way or another, we want to make smaller pieces. So you can rip and put it on the cooking tray that we're going to put in the oven at 300 degrees, 250 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit is what you're looking for. We don't want to toast these, we don't want to brown them, we just want to really dry them out so that they're super crunchy all the way through without being browned. So you can rip them, or I actually find it easier to cut them like this, cut into strips, and then cut across, and this way you get more uniform size pieces, and that'll mean that they will dry more uniform. So here we go. Okay, and we're back. So here we have mostly uniform pieces. I mean, there's some smaller pieces and there's some bigger pieces, but they're relatively even. Now we're just going to spread them out on our baking sheet. There is no oil involved at this stage. We do not want to introduce any oils because we want to store these breadcrumbs as dry crumbs in our cupboard for as long as we can. If we introduce oil, butter, olive oil, whatever kind of oil, they're going to go rancid on us. So we're not putting any oil on these. We just want to dry them out. Basically, we're dehydrating bread here is what we're doing. So when we have a nice full sheet like this, going to pop it into the oven somewhere between 250 and 300 degrees Fahrenheit. It depends on how good you are at watching them. So if you tend to lose track, keep it at a lower heat and they won't get away on you and get too brown. So in the oven they go. It's been about half the time that we need to dry out our breadcrumbs, and I just want to share with you, this is what I would do. I would check some of them, especially some of the bigger pieces, and see, can I squish them? And if I still feel some softness, I'm going to keep going, because if they are soft in the middle like this one, I know that when I go to turn them into breadcrumbs, they'll either turn gummy in the food processor or they just won't break down if I use my mallet or rolling pin. So they're sounding pretty good, but I know they need a little bit longer. Back in the oven they go, a little bit longer. You hear that? That's dry bread. So all of these big pieces, you should be able to crumble these just with your hand. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So now, option one for how to turn these into breadcrumbs. So this is tricky, but a really great workout. So if you're looking for a way to, you know, get some muscles, this is the way to go. So I'm gonna put the breadcrumbs, the perfectly beautifully dry breadcrumbs, in a baggie. They've cooled as well so that there's no condensation that's going to build up in here. And then I'm going to take my rolling pin and I'm gonna start to really crush. And it's not just about rolling them. You see I'm having like trouble rolling, but I'm actually eating these breadcrumbs. Now my bag's gonna be shredded by the end of this. That's okay. And you just keep beating. If your rolling pin's too much, you can use the side of a meat mallet as well and really get in there. The benefit of this style is you do have the ultimate in control in terms of how big your crumbs. But let me finish this. All right, between the meat mallet and the rolling pin, I think we've done a pretty good job on these breadcrumbs. Moment of truth, I'm gonna pour them into my bowl and see what we've got. Now, my bag does have holes in that, so it's a little bit crummy, but here we go. Look at that, doesn't that look beautiful? All right, the final way, and probably my preferred way to make breadcrumbs is with my food processor. And basically you put your breadcrumbs in the food processor. I have just the regular blade going, and then we're just gonna pulse it. Careful, this is gonna be loud. And just like that, we have our breadcrumbs. Now, there are gonna be some bigger ones on the top and some smaller ones on the bottom. You decide how fine you want your breadcrumbs to be, and then away you go. So I'm going to pour that in here. Let's see if we can see a difference between the ones with the rolling pin and those without. Pretty much the same. So now to store the breadcrumbs, I'm going to pour mine into a glass jar and seal it very tight. The only real criteria is that you use an airtight container. It can be a plastic bag that can seal very tight, a plastic container, a Tupperware container. It doesn't really matter. So let's see if I can get it all in here. There we go. Now these breadcrumbs, which are completely dry, so they're dehydrated, all the moisture has been removed, will stay in the cupboard for at least a month to 3 months, if not longer. If I want to keep them for an extra long time, I can put this directly in the freezer and it'll stay for a year or longer without any issues. Now you notice I haven't seasoned my breadcrumbs because I like to use my breadcrumbs for various reasons. So I like to season them as I use them. So if I'm going to make something that requires Italian seasoning, then I add the Italian seasoning to just the amount that I need for a particular recipe. So there you have it, how to make breadcrumbs.